We have abbreviated reviews and we have skip reviews. So we will start and go over kind of what some of these are, what the specifics are of each kind, just so you kind of get a flavor for what they are, what the forms are that go with them, and how you go about getting these places online. So the first one will be emergency certifications. Excuse me. And these are, again, for true emergencies only. These are the type of things where if someone needs to move on relatively short notice. The provider gave notice today, gave notice 2 days ago. That does happen on occasion, unfortunately. And this person needs a home to go to immediately. Um, if you have a home already that has certified beds that are open, obviously the person can go in there and that would not involve an emergency. But these are situations where they have no place to go. There's no certified bed at any of your homes right now that can have this person go and live with them. So again, these are for true emergencies. Um, Certificates for the emergencies are backdated up to 7 days. So what happens, if this happens on a Friday afternoon, which you've seen several of those over the years, where they give notice immediately, the person has to move today. Your focus, your primary focus at that point, obviously, will be and should be to get this person placed someplace where they're going to be safe until you can figure out kind of what the process is for that person. Um, these can be backdated up to 7 days, and these are the only certificate that I can actually backdate per rule. So if this person moves on a Friday, you need to get them settled wherever they are. As long as I have that application by the following week, by Thursday or Friday of that next week, we can backdate it to that Friday. So I can backdate up to 7 days, which is really helpful. Um, there are no life safety report required for the emergency certifications because these are the situations where, typically if you have to move someone in a crisis, you can't get the fire department out there that same day. They're not going to be able to come out typically and do your life safety and, follow the typical temporary initial review process. So we do allow, the life safety process life safety process we put it aside while this emergency takes place. If a life safety report has been done, however, you're no longer eligible for the emergency certification process at that time, regardless of if you pass or fail. So, if you have a move coming up, you have plenty of time to plan this. Moving then, next day, 2 days from now, whatever the case may be, the fire department comes out to do the life safety. If the life safety fails and we can't open the home, at that point, you need to kind of work with the fire department or you can't certify that site because we can't have an emergency online once we know that the fire department has been out there and they have said no to whatever the situation is. Um, what we do encourage people to do though is work with your local fire departments. There's a bunch of them out there that, if they know your agency and they've worked well with them in the past, they may be willing to work with you as far as the life safety component goes. They may come out and do a life safety and say, well, you need to fix these 3 things type of thing. And they may, in those cases, some of them are willing to give you like a kind of a short-term contingent life safety for 30 days, 45 days, whatever the case would be, that will allow you to get whatever is done. And then they come out at that point and they sign off again on that same life safety to say that they've gone out, they've re-inspected, everything they requested is in place, and then you're good to go from there as far as life safety goes. These are issued for 45 days. So whatever the day we go with on the start date, that starts the clock and it will run out for 45 days. And the way the emergency system works in the database is the 45th day is a hard date and the database closes the home on day 45. So once that day has come and gone, I can't go back in and fix it at that point. I can't reopen it to give you an extension, and it's going to involve a gap in days at that point. Um, as a reference here, though, there is a time for option right now for a one-time emergency extension. So if you know, depending what the situation is, if the person's going to be moving to a different home in the near future, if this is going to be their home where they're going to stay, you need to kind of figure that piece out. That'll kind of tell you how to respond to those pieces. But the option here gives you another 45-day extension. So if you get to be like, day 40, 42, the person's not going to be staying here, or we need to do a few more things to make sure we're going to be in compliance when the fire department comes out, we'll give you another 45-day extension as long as we have that emergency app again to verify that you have requested 45 more days. You have a total of 90 days in emergency situations. As it notes here, you can also issue a cert for an emergency in an already certified home. So if you have a one-person home, you have a two-person home, but there's an extra bedroom or two in the house there somewhere, you could potentially do an emergency cert at one of those other beds. The benefit of this is a known provider. They've already been through life safety pieces, so they know the routine. They already are med trained in those cases. There's a lot of pluses to doing it in those homes. But you can never go over 3. So if you've got 3 beds currently, they're all full, you can't do a special emergency there. But if you have a 1 or 2 bed home, you can request an emergency cert to bring that number up to 2 or 3 to allow you to use those other beds in the home. And that would give you 45 days again to either find another location or to get the fire department out there to add that second bed or that third bed. In the application, for those of you who've seen it, it's a pretty simple application. It's really actually just some basic information. We want to know the address for the home, obviously. We want to know the home provider or the home manager name if it's a staffed home. We need to know the vendor or provider agency and the contact person, the area agency, and that contact person. And again, some of this stuff will be changing on 7/1. At that point, the area agencies who utilize vendors, the vendors will do the application themselves, is what we're looking at right now. BDS is still working on that process with us, but the plan will be as of 7/1, if you need an emergency cert, you would do it yourself and get the guardian approval if needed, whatever they end up deciding for process here. So we're working on that process now. So it may be a little bit of a change between now and then, but we'll know more soon, hopefully. The app will ask you how many current beds you have and how many CPS slots you have, if you have any, and then it will be requesting the number of beds and CPS slots that you want to have there. The bottom box is all the individual's information, so we need to know I believe it's their name, date of birth, and then the reason for the emergency. What prompted you to have to do an emergency cert versus going and doing a temporary or initial cert. Now, this is here, applications must be signed by the area agency and then sent to our office with the floor plan. That is in the rule today, that's the process today, but my anticipation is that that's going to be changing before 7/1, either through a rule change or a waiver or something to get by some time until the rule is actually changed, because the area agencies will not sign off on. If you're working for, a current vendor agency, that will change the process for you going forward.
I think, sorry to cut you off, Peter. I think
No, jump right in, Jay.
I think they address it in the new 504. There's something about that in there. I pulled it out for us to talk about later, but I think if everyone has that draft of the new 504, you can find the change for emergency applications within that somewhere.
Okay, good. I'm glad they did put that in there.
Oops, I'm sorry.
And as it says here, the bottom thing, at least right now, as far as how the process goes, just confirm who's actually going to submit that application to this office. And we need the application and the current floor plan for emergency, showing us the exits where the individual's bedroom is, smoke detectors, that type of thing. But the reason we say to confirm is we've had a handful of situations over the years where home they think they've applied for an emergency application process to go through. They'll send it to the area agency to be approved. And then there's been some kind of a breakdown on a number of occasions where the vendor agency thought the area agency would submit it to us and vice versa. And consequently, no one submitted it. So suddenly we're out at day 45 and, one of the agencies is asking for a copy of the certificate and we haven't got it because no one submitted anything. And I can't backdate them at that point. Obviously, I could do 7 days, but I can't go back the 45 days that you're in at this point. So, at least for the next few months, for the folks who work for the vendor agencies, just make sure that you, when you do work with the area agency, that you know who's going to submit that document to us. All right, temporary certifications. And these situations, you're going to complete an application. And as long as the application comes to us complete and you have a life safety approved by the fire department within the last 90 days, we can open you that same day. So I think it's like our PowerPoint bounced back, Jay.
Someone took control of the PowerPoint. I took control back. Please don't
Oh,
do
no.
that.
Well, that shouldn't happen.
No, that should not be able to happen. I'll fix that in the next session. There you go. I got it back for you.
I'm like, wait, we just said the emergency starts. Why are we back here?
Yeah, it
All
warned
right,
me. It
so
said somebody took control of the PowerPoint. I was like, stop it. Don't do that.
all right, so again, temporary certs, as long as the application is complete, life safety has been approved, we open you the same day. And again, it can be any time of day. I've come in some mornings, at 7, 8 o'clock, and there'll be a life safety application here for an open attempt last night. We'll come in at 9, 10, 11 o'clock, depending what the manager was doing that day, and we will open on the day you requested. I can't go back beyond that, obviously, but if you submit it on that day, we will take it for that day. Because we know that certification is important, obviously, but all of you have a lot of other duties in your lives every single day that you need to be doing. And we can appreciate that you may not always get the document to us when it's actually typical business hours. So as long as we can see that it arrived here before midnight, then we'll use that same day. Yeah. All right. So again, we need an approved life safety report, and it's going to be within the past 90 days. So just keep an eye on that date, because we've had several, by more than several, over the past year or two, where I'll get a life safety, but it was signed, 3, 4, 6 months ago at times. I can't use them when they're past 90 days. And we've had a couple come in that they're tough because they're day 92 or 93. But if we say 92 or 93 is fine, then maybe 95 is okay too. And then we're up to 98. So we definitely stick by the 90-day situation. And again, if you have to go out and take the life safety back to the fire department, some may be willing to just re-sign it, knowing that they were out there recently and re-sign a date. Others are going to want to come back out, obviously, and do another life safety because it's been, a pretty significant gap since they were out there last. So just make sure that you kind of monitor that situation. We need directions to the home or the CPS site. My staff all use GPS to get to the homes at this point, but some of the problems we've been running into over the past year or so is there's a lot of new construction going on and a lot of developments that aren't listed anywhere right now. So I think Carrie had one several months ago that her and I were working on. She was going to the house, and it didn't show up on her GPS anywhere. It wouldn't show up and she didn't have written directions with her at that point to be able to get to the location. So I tried to look it up, and I was able to go onto Zillow of all cases because they were home for sale on that road. So I was able to kind of feed her in from the directions that the real estate company used. But other than that, we would have had to make some phone calls and try to get kind of waved in. So just if you can include directions as clearly as possible, especially if it's something that isn't going to show up on a GPS currently, if you can just kind of write out the directions so they're pretty black and white so we can get there at the time that we're all agreed upon. Also, along with the application on life safety, we do want a copy of any waiver applications and or approvals, if applicable. If it's, if you had a waiver for whatever the situation was with the home provider and they moved to a different location, we can still use that approval because it's really person specific at that point as far as what the waiver is to, kind of get you started with that one. But if it's a new situation, if a new home provider and you are trying to get them online, just make sure that the waiver stuff is complete. If you're still waiting for approval, you just send me a copy of the waiver application. I can't issue you a temp until that waiver approval has been completed by BDS. And then once they get through their approval process over there, they'll send it to me. And then I can issue a temporary CERB. It'll be issued effective the day you requested. So if you requested something to open today on the 16th of May, and you had a waiver application with it, and you didn't get the waiver approved until June 3rd or something from BDS, we'll open you effective today, the day that you requested. So we can backdate those because we had it in our office, at the proper period. We just didn't have the waiver approval to make sure everyone was on board before we actually opened the home. A temporary certification, they are issued for 90 days. So that allows you time to kind of, get settled in there, prepare for your upcoming review. We will do the temp inspection usually around day 90, give or take. We've had a staff person out several months ago for several months, and I've had to have a person reassigned doing some other duties recently. So we've fallen a little bit behind at this point. So if it does run over, even though your certificate for a temp may have expired, that certificate is still valid in our database as far as billing purposes go. It just shows that it's a pending renewal, basically. So, you can still use that as, submission to the agency as far as their benefits go. If anyone calls you about those, just send them my way and I can give them something in writing if that'd be easier to make sure that they're on the same page we are as far as the current status for that location. Again, site review happens around the 90-day mark, give or take. All right, so this is the certification application. So again, this is all to open a new home, and it serves a lot of other purposes too that we'll talk about as we go along. But the primary purpose we use these for, obviously, is to open a home and then to do the renewals, etc. So I'm just going to run through the form real quick, just so you get a flavor of kind of how we want information put on here and really what we're looking for. So the top block on page 1 is pretty simple. You need to know the physical address. You need to know the cert number, which is going to be non-applicable at that point for a temp because you haven't come online yet. Unless you're coming off an emergency to a temp, then you'd have a certain number then. But otherwise, if you're a brand new home, it's strictly going to be 0 at that point. The mailing address, if it's different, the requested start date for the home. The current number of slot. If this is a temporary cert and no one's living there currently, you open it today, we want it, those are both going to be zeros because no one's living there currently. You don't have a cert for any beds or CPS slots at that home right now. But you're going to put down below that how many beds and CPS slots you are requesting. So whatever your life safety says, if it's 1, 2, 3 beds, whatever the case is, and then whatever you need for matching CPS slots, if any. We do encourage people that if the plan is to use all the beds the fire department puts on there, ask for all of those on the initial application. So the fire department comes out and they give you initial approval for 2 beds that you're looking for. Then when you send the temp application into us, we want you to request those 2 beds if you think you're going to be using that one regularly for, someone for like a respite, quote unquote, bed if needed, or you can have a second person coming, but not today. Otherwise, if you get, beyond the 90-day mark, I can't use that life safety at that point to add that second bed in. Even though we have life safety for 2 that was dated, January 3rd, I can't use that today because it's gone by the 90-day mark. So just when you get those life safety, just make sure that basically what the fire department approved and what you're going to be looking for now and going forward. Down below that, we just ask for, here's a residential situation here. Is it a CPS standalone, or is it a combination of both residential and CPS under the same roof? Information below that is pretty basic. We just need to know who to contact for a site visit as far as name, email address, and the phone number. And just below that, we want to know the home provider's name and then the phone number for that location also, be it this provider's, either landline or telephone, whatever they use regularly. If it's a staffed home you're opening, then just put down the manager's name there and the phone number to reach them. Below that, there's just 4 quick questions. Is the home currently licensed? Odds are that's going to be no 99% of the time. But we do have situations out there where some of the home providers have a foster care license and they have taken children in on occasion. So just you would note that there and note what their situation is as far as the the cert number goes for that. And just remember that those folks, even though they're not necessarily on the DD waiver, ABD waiver, they have to be counted into the life safety report because that is for any individuals, regardless of their funding source. So if you have, life safety from the fire department for 3 and you have 1 individual and 2 foster care kids, you got to make sure you have that life safety for 3. They can't just be for the individual receiving the 1001 services. So that encompasses anyone regardless of whatever their payment source is. And we ask if the home is under emergency certification. We ask down below that just some basic CPS questions. Is the individual at the CPS site more than 1 hour per day? So again, if it's a typical standalone CPS program, the answer could be yes or no, because a lot of the folks are, community-based. Very few people, especially prior to COVID, went out and went to the day program site more than, a few minutes or maybe a half hour for lunch or something. People are typically in the field. But if the CPS slot is going to be billed out of the home, then the answer is always going to be yes, because they're always there more than an hour, regardless of the CPS hours they may have. They live there, so. And then in the CPS again, are they located in a currently certified community residence? Just so we'll know kind of what the deal is with those. And then page 2, it's a pretty simple application. It's page 1 and 2, not a whole lot of difficult questions here. So number 2, on top, we're looking for the individual or individuals information. And all we're looking for right now is their full name, the date of birth, what their funding source is it developmental services waiver, is it the ABD waiver, or they serve through behavioral health. Number of hours of supervision required by the service agreement per day or a week. Most people tend to put the hours by week, because that's how we track it at this point. So if someone's, has support and supervision 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the number is 168. Beyond that, though, it can be a lot of variation. I have some folks who we see they'll have, 1 or 2 hours a day, maybe during the week after their CPS program, but then they may be able to have 6 or 8 or 10 hours unsupervised on the weekend. So it's really not a good, compass as far as what we're looking for around numbers if we go by per day, because it really does vary a lot for individuals as far as what they get any given day. If they have CPS, who's a CPS provider, and they're looking for the actual agency name, not for the specific person. And then just 2 quick questions. Do they have a behavior plan currently? And do they self-administer their medication currently? The next 2 pieces down here, the vendor agency contact and area agency contact. This will be changing again at some point down the road here after 7.1, because we will no longer be listing area agencies unless they're the one that's actually providing the service. But if you work for a provider agency, you fill out your information the way you always do. And if you are the area agency providing the services going forward, then you would do your information there. We have to figure out how to adjust the app down the road. We can't change it ourselves because it's part of the rule. So it has to go downtown to the administrative folks to look at any kind of change to vote forms that we do. Down below that, here's what we're asking for. Anyone not listed above who is a member of the household, but they are not related. So it's a non-family type of situation. This could be where folks are on the foster care waiver. They can be folks that are PDMS. There's a couple private pay folks we have in our situation. So any of those folks that don't fall under the DD or ABD waiver above, this is where you're going to list their name. And we need to know their name, their date of birth, and then what that funding source is. Again, is it PDMS, is it private pay, whatever the case is, just so we know kind of what their situation is over there. And there are 3 questions at the bottom. So the first one was the current life safety report attached. Is this new residential program, new facility-based CPS, addition, etc. Are any waivers required? So if you have any waiver requests that are coming in, if you have current waivers that you already have, submit those to us with your application. And then the last question is important. It says, has any provider or adult household member, excluding individuals, been convicted of any misdemeanor or felony, or had a substantiated report of abuse, neglect, or exploitation? If yes, please attach the current waiver. This is, this is huge information, obviously, because if folks have a criminal record, we need to ensure that they have a waiver in place from everyone that needs to approve that. And if they are on the BEAS waiver for abuse, neglect, exploitation, we need to find out what that status is, because typically you're on that list for 7 years. And we had a situation recently where we had done our annual inspection back last fall. Their agency, it's my understanding, put down there's nobody there that had any of these things. And then we found out a few months back now that there was a person that had apparently been on the registry for the better part of a year. He should not have been providing services during any of that time. And they had no waivers. They had no, nothing from BAS to remove them from the registry. So it got to be, a huge deal, obviously, because it involves payment. It became, it was bordering on a fraudulent activity at that point. They're billing for services without providing, accurate information to this unit. So we tried to kind of close that gap as far as what we do here in the office and what we do with BAS. But it definitely was a challenge there to get that resolved. After that, basically, you're just going to sign saying that everything on the application is true and valid. So, and with that application, again, you can use it to open a home, as we talked about, but you can also use it for a variety of other things. This, pretty much is what we use for everything that we do beyond that. So if you're doing a renewal request again every year, those have got to come in, and we'll talk more about those as we get further in here. You're going to use the application to add or remove a bed, add or remove a CPS slot. You're going to use it to add or remove an individual from the home or CPS site. So our database should be as accurate as possible at all times, just so that we know where people are living. So if someone calls us looking to see where so-and-so is living, there's been, emergency that we need to, get involved in, we need to make sure that we have the same house, that they're at the location that we think they're at, because sometimes the service agreements haven't caught up yet as far as where they're currently living. So just make sure you notify us of those changes as soon as possible. And if it's someone that you currently support, but they're moving to a new location, we need to have two applications. We need one from the home that they're currently living in, taking them out. And then we need an application for the home that they're going to be in, putting them into that location. Otherwise, they'll show up twice in our database, and it just causes error messages. And then we've got to go back and try to figure out, where people are actually living at this point in time. So again, try to follow those processes as best you can. If you have questions on those kind of things, obviously reach out to myself or Jay, any of the surveyors. We can certainly walk you through any of those pieces. If there's a change in level of supervision, if you can let us notify us of that, that would be wonderful. Again, so folks go from 24-hour supervision a day, 168 a week, to having some unsupervised time and whatever that may be, just so we can have that information current here. And then a change of any contact information. So if there's a change in the home provider, change in the contact people that we deal with as far as managers, directors, case managers, whoever, and then the phone number, et cetera, and email for those folks. All right, so the life safety report. There's a variety of reasons why you obtain a new life safety report. Again, as we talked about a little bit ago here, you use them to open a new home or open a new CPS slot. And that for the CPS slots, the ones, CPS sites rather, the ones that stand alone, a lot of them at this point are simply an office space that you folks build the CPS out of. It's not typically a location where people go to do activities, but that is the case in certain situations. But if there'll be no CPS services provided for more than an hour a day at the site, then we don't require a life safety for that CPS location. But if you're going to use that site more than an hour per day for CPS activities, then you can have the fire department come out and do a life safety for that site to make sure that they are comfortable with the life safety components in that building, and will approve you for whatever your slot requirement is. See. So again, adding a bed, adding a CPS, changing individual's bedroom to another room in the house. So these are situations where you could have 1, 2 certified bedrooms. These are the 2 bedrooms that the fire department signed off and approved when they came in. But now there's another bedroom that no one is in, but it wasn't one of the ones that they certified. And the provider wants to see if they can utilize that bedroom instead. We had one recently where the person had been upstairs for most of the time they had been at this house. And then because they were having some ambulatory issues, they wanted to move them downstairs into a downstairs bedroom and did some switching around the house. But the one downstairs hadn't been signed off yet by the fire department. So if you're going to be changing bedrooms around and it's not the currently certified rooms that the fire department approved, just reach out to them and have them come back out and do a new life safety for the current 2 bedrooms you want to be using, or the current 1 bedroom if it's only one individual, obviously. So just kind of keeping up on those life safety pieces. Any change in egress, so if you're changing windows in the house, and if it's simply, changing one window out and putting another same size window in, those don't require a life safety. But if you're doing like change of doors, adding a ramp, putting different size windows in, that type of thing, we definitely want the fire department to come out and do another life safety at that point to make sure all the egresses still meet the requirements that they're looking for. And then it's any time that the work is completed on the home or CPS site that required a building permit. So and that varies from town to town, and city to city, as far as what they require you to get a building permit for. Some of the bigger cities are obviously, pretty stuck on certain things that they have to have done. that we may not see like in smaller towns. So really work with the locals and kind of know what they're going to be looking for around building permit stuff. You know, you don't want to be having to call them later and try to ask for forgiveness. It's better to ask for permission initially. You find with most departments, they're much more active, you know, and able to work with us. All right. So these are the life safety reports that we use currently. These are new within the past year or so. One on the left is for the 1 to 3 person homes, and the one on the right is for the standalone CPS programs. So all you're going to fill in on either one of these is that top block where it has the identifying information, where they want to know the name, the address, phone number, all that stuff goes in there. You can fill that out on both of these life safeties. Anything below that is going to be filled out by the fire department only. So you'll see there's a number of questions on there for each situation, and they'll check off yes or no. And then at the bottom of that number section, you'll see this is where the life safety number of approved beds or slots goes. So, and they sign down below that with the fire code that they used. Make sure when they fill this out with you that when you get it back from them that day, that they filled in a number as far as beds or life safety goes. We've had like, how many we just say, Jay? Handful every month, I think, that is missing a bed number.
Yeah.
And what happens then? We have to have you go back out to the fire department and have them write in the number of beds and the initial and date beside that, so we know that they, you know, were the ones that actually added the bed number in. And you'll see that these things are built in such a manner that they can give you a temporary approval and then come back out and re-inspect for the departments that do that. All right, so I know we threw a lot at you in those last half hour or so here, 40 minutes. Let's go see if we have any questions regarding those basic processes before we move into the other more specific pieces around forms and so forth.
And if anybody needs any of these forms that you're seeing, just let us know. We can always email them to you. And I believe Adam has a question. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask Adam, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say I like the slideshow presentation. Is it available for us to use to refer to on our own time, or is that something you guys keep for yourselves?
Yeah, we can certainly share that.
Awesome.
We just ask if you're going to use it regularly to check in with us regularly, because things change, obviously, as far as rules. We have to go in and adapt, you know, like we adapted our PowerPoint, half hour ago, Jay?
Yeah.
We're doing something before things started. So there are changes that happen pretty regularly. So
yeah, we have someone do it for us, but yeah, I figured maybe it'd be good for my own reference, just for knowledge and studying later on. There's a lot of things that are hard to see on the screen, but you know, useful information. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we're recording this session just so everybody knows. So we will be able to offer this after. It got started a little late because I'm bad at recording things apparently, but but otherwise it should be working.
All right, thank you, John.
Sure. Thank you for your question. Go ahead, Dawn. Oh, sorry, Peter, did I cut you off?
No, go ahead. No, you're fine.
This was really a great information. I'm relatively new still to Life Connections as a program manager. And so I just had a couple of questions. So once a life safety certification is already done, I just want to make sure I understood this clearly, that a home cannot be considered as an emergency, or did I not hear that correctly?
Yeah, once the life safety is done, the only way you do an emergency at that point would be if you want to add a bed beyond what the life safety was. But if the fire department comes out with the life safety and they fail the house, then you cannot do an emergency, because we all know, they know, and we know now that the home did not pass the life safety pieces that they were looking for. And sometimes it's windows, sometimes it's missing smoke detectors here and there. So, and again, I definitely recommend working with your local fire departments, get to know them, you know, kind of see what they feel. That they've all done these at this point. You know, there's some small towns probably they haven't done many of them, but most fire departments are willing to talk to you about, you know, kind of what they're looking for. And, you know, again, some can give you, you know, a little bit of a grace period to get things addressed and give you like a temporary approval, but it really depends on the department, obviously, what their comfort level is.
So I have a second part to that question as well.
Sure.
So the second part of that is, once a life safety is approved and done, it doesn't have to be reapproved ever unless there's a bed or like something has changed significantly within the residence?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay,
there's no requirement that, they come out every 2, 3, 5 years, whatever the case is.
okay, thank you for
Um,
that.
Even though it's a good idea, and some agencies do that, some of the problems a few of them have run into over the years, if they came online a while back and then they had the fire department come back out, depending on the department, some may, the fire code would have changed over the period of years, and they may want to impose that new fire code on, an existing home. So that's kind of why we built in the transfer piece, in the last couple of rewrites of the rule, just so that, because if you do a transfer from one agency to another, you don't have to do another life safety because the home's been online for 15 years and they close and then they have to reopen next week for a new agency. They may not be able to get a life safety, signed off right away because there may be new things required today that weren't required, in 2010 or something. So it does kind of evolve.
Thank you for answering those questions. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah, and I think some towns are actually requiring re-inspections. There's not a lot of them, but I know Brookline can be a little bit funky like that.
Yeah.
I think they come
Yeah.
out like every 2 years or something like that in Brookline, if I'm not mistaken.
Great. And you'll see it varies by department too for life safeties as to what they charge. Some still do it for nothing. Some are charging, I'm hearing $50, $75 to come out, things like that. So just kind of keeping that in mind as far as preparing yourself before you do that. And some you go to the fire department, you set it up. Others require you to go to the town or the city hall or something and built by a permit type of thing, and then they schedule a review with you. So just kind of figuring out with the fire department kind of what their processes are and the timelines involved, just so you don't get stuck and not be able to get life safety when you need it. But again, the emergency is there for that. So if you need someone moving in Monday, the fire department now can't get out there until maybe next Friday, you could do the emergency starting on Monday, and that would buy you time to get the fire department out there to get that sign off. So it allows you to start billing at that point.
Doesn't look like there's any other questions at this point.
And like we said earlier, we want you to ask questions if you have any questions whatsoever. We'd much rather answer it for you now and not have to, you feel stuck down later and not be able to, get a hold of us, not be able to get an answer right away. And if stuff comes up after today, obviously you could email myself, you can email Jay, any other surveyors here, we can help you get the answer to you pretty quickly. We're all on the road quite a bit these days, but everyone's checking their email at least 3 times a day to keep up on this stuff. So definitely reach out whenever there's questions. Okay. All right. Do you want to jump in, Jay? Jay's done more work than I want to think about developing all our tools for us and keeping it steady. Again, those have evolved a lot over the past 10 years here, 15 years. So, and Jay's put hundreds of hours, I swear, into getting this stuff, so it works really well. So he's done a really nice job on these forms and keeping them, consistent and manageable for folks. So if you want to roll through that for a minute, Jay.
Sure. So, you'll typically be contacted before the review or a couple months before the certification review. Depends on when the temporary expires, if it's a temporary program, and renewals. We usually have our assignments a couple months beforehand. So a lot of people think we schedule based on the applications you submit, but that's not true. We have a certification list that gets printed out by our database, and we utilize that. So we still ask for your applications to be in 60 days before the program expires because that's in the rule, but it's not how we end up scheduling the review. So typically you're going to have 1 to 2 months to prepare for all certification reviews. Your preparation should include the following. So you're going to review the digital submission policy, which we'll look at later, to see what documents need to be gathered and submitted electronically to the surveyor on or before the agreed upon date. And you're going to review the current certification tool to see what the surveyor will be looking for on the date of the site walkthrough, if that's applicable, if it's not an abbreviated review. And I really can't emphasize this enough, that your certification tool is an amazing pre-certification tool. Like, You're not going to get better answers anywhere than using that tool and going through it and actually completing it yourself. And if you find gaps in that, we're going to find the same gaps when we use that tool. So we really, really recommend it. You don't need to submit any sort of completed tool to us, but it is a really good pre-certification tool to use. All initial and oh, did someone have to say something? Okay. One second, I'm just gonna mute everybody. There we go. All initial and annual reviews will require a site walkthrough, and abbreviated reviews and skip reviews will typically not require a walkthrough. That can vary depending, but for the most part, you're not going to have a walkthrough for those types of reviews. The specifics of these reviews will be discussed shortly. So abbreviated review. An abbreviated review can only be earned if the home has had 1 to 3 deficiencies at their last annual inspection. So you can't earn an abbreviated off an initial review. You can only earn it off in a renewal review. So if your first initial inspection, you're always going to have another inspection approximately 8 months later to finish off that year of certification, because you get temporarily certified for 3 months. We come out within that time. We certify you again to the end of the year. So then we come out at the end of the year to continue that certification and finish it off. So then you're certified into the next year, starting with that certification cycle. The preparation for an abbreviated review is similar to an annual inspection, as you'll need to submit the same documents to your surveyor by the agreed upon date. The only difference is that the site visits will not typically be completed as part of an abbreviated review, but you'll still want to do a site visit yourself, because there are questions on the tool that refer to things in the home. So even though we may not be coming to the home, we strongly encourage the manager or the certification specialist to go to the home. Licensed homes and standalone CPS programs are not currently eligible for abbreviated reviews. So skip a year reviews. So these are the reviews that Peter does. Based on a packet that you're going to submit to him. So a skip review can only be earned if the home had 0 deficiencies at their last annual inspection. If the home earns a skip review, the agency will receive an email approximately 60 days before the certificate expires, which will include a cover letter along with several documents referred to in the cover letter explaining what needs to be submitted and by what date. Going off the top of my head, I believe right now it's the residential information packet, a verification letter, documentation that you're in compliance with the lock and key requirements, the residential information packet, and the certification application. I think I repeated one of those ones, but that's okay. Did I cover everything there, Peter?
Yeah, again, I think that Jay and I have seen this recently for the past several months. When you get the skip letter in the mail or an email, just send us what is on that letter is all we're looking for. Typically it ends up being 10 or 12 pages, but we've had several recently where the agencies put a lot of work into it, and they send us every single document like it's a full review. So we go pick out the 12 pages that we need, but they put a lot of effort into, putting the documentation together. But the letter, again, it bullets out the 3 or 4 things that we're looking for, and that's it. Nothing beyond that is required to be sent to us. So we've had agencies that have done a lot more work on that stuff than they really need to.
Okay. Matt Klenneman has a question. Matt, I'm just going to get to that at the when we break for the next question break. It'll probably be in about 10 minutes, maybe 15. An on-site inspection is not typically part of a skip review. And then licensed homes and standalone CPS programs are not currently eligible for skip reviews. But currently eligible is hard to say. Biennial reviews. So although biennial reviews that are done every 2 years are no longer an option home certified under HEM 1001, they are currently still an option for certain standalone CPS programs. To earn a biennial inspection, the CPS program must have 50 or fewer certified CPS slots and must have 2 or fewer deficiencies at their last annual inspection. So most CPS agencies do not take the biennial reviews. And the reason for that is that when you do a biennial review of your agency, you're required to review every single individual's record that is receiving services at the time of the review. So when we do it, we only pick a sample of the individuals. So we might pick, 4 individuals out of the 10 that are there. But if you're doing it, you have to do all 10 individuals. So a lot of agencies tend not to take the skip years for CPS, but you're certainly welcome to. But just be aware that can be kind of a tough workload when you're doing the abbreviated. I'm sorry, when you're doing the biennial. I'm not sure that link is still working. So Matt had a question about the link at the top of our form. So we put that link in, and then the state decided to change their website. So I don't believe that link is currently working. So we have to update those forms and add the new link. But for a while we
Right.
couldn't because the links weren't working at the state website either. So the new website. So they seem to all be working now. So we can update those, and the new forms can be updated with those. And if anybody needs these forms, like we said before, please feel free to reach out. We can provide them. Any other questions? Don't seem to be.
Okay.
All right, just kind of roll forward then.
Yeah.
Okay. You want me to keep going with this, Peter?
Yeah, if you would do the information packet stuff, since you did all the work on those, then I'll
Sure.
jump in stuff towards the end again, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. So the residential information packet, it's an unfortunate acronym for that, so it just is what it is. But this document is completed as part of all residential certification inspections, initial, annual, abbreviated, and skip. The following information is included in this packet. So it's the individual's medication information, including medication administration information, the staff and home provider information regarding background checks, insurance, etc., staff and home provider training dates, residence information with regard to smoke detectors, furnace inspection, well water tests, etc., and the fire evacuation drills going back to when the home opened for initial reviews or back to the last certification inspection for annual, abbreviated, and skip inspections. So we're going to go through each page of this packet here coming up. So this is the cover page, and you're just going to fill out the individual's name and what area agency they attend. And please make sure to sign and date the bottom. And remember, when you're signing that, you're signing your life away, that everything in there is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. So this is the second page. This is the medication administration page, which we recently revised probably about a year ago. So your nurse is going to either fill this out, or she's going to have somebody else fill it out, and then she's going to sign it, verifying that the information is correct in here. So I won't go through every single thing on here. If you want to take a look at this, and then if you have any questions about the things on this page, that's fine, but it's fairly self-explanatory the way we've set it up. I don't think this one usually has too many questions, but if you have any, please feel free to let us know. And your nurse is going to sign and date the bottom of that page. And this is just the medication list page. So you feel free to use this. This is just for you to fill in the individual's medications. If you have a med list that's in a similar format, you can go ahead and submit that instead of this page. You don't need to reinvent the wheel if you've got a good med list. I know like Aspire has a pretty solid med list that they use in substitution of this. So that's fine. And then if you do fill this out, just make sure you put the individual's name, date of birth, and then whoever filled out this form, it signs and dates the bottom. It does not need to be the nurse. So page 4. So this is the record check and insurance page. So in this, all of our forms read left to right. So you're going to see that's got this individual the staff or provider name and their date of hire. Of course, this is very small on my screen, so I'm trying to do it out of memory more than anything because I'm in presenter mode here. But you've got your attestations. So those are done for either people that have been hired for more than a year, because the rule doesn't cover people initially hired. It says that they're going to have it done annually. So if you're having to utilize Appendix K for any reason around these record checks, you're going to want to have them sign an attestation. So if you didn't have the record check done prior to hire, due to the Appendix K allowance, make sure you had that staff sign an attestation to cover the period of time where you didn't have a valid record check for them. That allowance is going to be going away November 11th, like Peter was mentioning, at the end of the state of emergency, but you do still have that exception now. So Appendix K allowed for 90 days to complete the criminal record check and the DMV check. It did not give you any extra time to complete the BEAS check. And then there's a spot on there for the insurance for the residents and any autos used to transport the individual, and then the TB test date for any prospective provider. And then page 5 is the staff training information. And I think this is where we end up seeing a lot of problems, because I'm not 100% sure people are fully aware of the difference between the top and the bottom of this grid. So the top of this grid are for individual specific trainings that have to occur prior to the staff working with the individual. So they have to be trained in all of the criteria in the top section prior to providing services to any individual, because they're individual specific. Now, it's weird that they put the overview of the system in there, because that's not really individual specific, but it's specific to individuals. So I'm not sure exactly why they ended up putting that in that, but they wanted people to have a history of the background of the system prior to providing services. So that's where it comes from. Now, the bottom section are what primarily people use Relias for. Now, not every agency uses Relias for these trainings, but most do. And if you don't, that's fine. You just put the date that your agency completed these trainings within 6 months of the staff being hired. So what I want to make sure that everyone knows is that the top dates and the bottom dates should almost never be the same. Whenever we see dates where the individual specific trainings are the same as the trainings that are required within 6 months, I almost always ask the question at the certification, because what normally has happened is that they've extrapolated all the Relias dates into here, and they're not actually using the individual specific dates. So I've seen this far more times than I care to count. So I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware that the bottom section are Relias, top section are individual specific, and those dates probably shouldn't be the same. It's fine if they are. You know, if you don't use Relias and you're doing orientation and everybody gets all the trainings on the same day, then that's fine. But it's usually a good chance that something's wrong if you see all those dates as the same. And then I'm just going to move into the last page here. So this is the residence information. So I'll go through each one of these lines just to make sure everyone's clear about exactly what we're asking for. So I've had some small issues with this recently. So the top is, we want to see in that first section the dates of the manufacturer dates of your smoke alarms, because we count 10 years from the date of that manufacturer date for when your alarm expires. If the alarm wasn't plugged in for a couple years, but the manufacturer date is still, 2 years ago, but they just started using that alarm today, it's still the date of the manufacturer, because we can't go by these other dates. We don't know when it got plugged into the wall. So we have to go by the manufacturer date. So make sure when you're having these things installed that you make sure that the manufacturer date is very close to when the actual install date is.
Yeah, we had one recently, Jay, that I went to, and they had just installed detectors when the home opened, and they pulled them down to have me take a look at a couple of them, and they were 8 years old,
Jeez.
and the company they use had just installed those like in the previous 3 months. So just make sure you kind of look at them when they come in, because you don't always know what you're getting. Hopefully they're rotating their stock, but in this case, they clearly were not. They were just pushing stuff back further and further, and then they end up not working really well anyway, and then find out that they were 8 years old before they even got plugged in. So yeah, definitely check those dates. And use magnifying glass, because they're really, really small.
They really are. And so we're looking for the dates of the well water test and the furnace inspection to make sure that the furnace inspection is no more than 13 months old. We give an extra month over the 12-month time frame. But if it's more than 13 months, we'll have to cite it for oil. And propane, we do the same. We allow for 2 years for propane, but you've got to have something from the servicing company that says that it's allowed to be cleaned and inspected every 2 years. If you don't have that piece of paper, then we can't allow for 2 years. It has to be an annual requirement. And if you've had a revised life safety, there's the spot in there for that. Now, this bottom section are all around things within the home, and they're just yes or no questions. You can just go through and answer yes or no to these. And I won't go through each one of those. I won't bore you by reading each one of those. And then you're just down at the bottom, you're going to list all the people in the home who are over 18 that are not receiving services within the home. And we're just doing that. That's basically a way for us to count, to know who's living in the home, so that we have enough bathrooms, because you have to have 1 bathroom for every 6 people. We also want to make sure we're not missing household members that should have been captured somewhere else on the form. And this last page is the fire drill grid. So the fire drill grid is just where you're going to put your fire drills that have occurred during the last year in the program. If you have something that looks very similar to this, if you're using the CSNI form, you can substitute that form. We agreed to that when we developed this form years ago. But I highly encourage people to use this form. It's easy. It's a good summary. All right. So before we jump into the packet, I noticed we had some questions that had come through. So I just want to make sure we address those before we get too far past them. Yeah, Kelly, as far as that DCYF, those DCYF checks that are in the new rule, yeah, we're going to be needing to amend our form to somehow include that information. Doesn't looks like that was the only question that came through. Okay. So the CPS information packet, this document is completed as part of all CPS certification inspections, annual, initial, and biennial. And the following information is included in this packet. And it's very similar to the other packet. It's actually less complicated than the other packet by quite a bit. So it's the same, the medication information, the staff and home provider information regarding background checks, insurances, et cetera, the staff and home provider training dates, and the fire drill information should also be attached to this packet if the CPS site has an approved life safety report and uses it for activities. So this is the cover page, and it's got that same broken link on it. And it's the same thing. You've got to sign and date the bottom of this. It doesn't show it on here. I think I cut it out when I clipped this page to show the form, but there is a signature line at the bottom with a date. And then so as you can see, I skipped past. Oh, you know what? I'm using the wrong PowerPoint. I actually added the medication information page and the med list into this, but I'm not using the right PowerPoint. So this packet has the same 2 pages that the other packet has. It has that medication administration information page, and it's got the med list page if needed. And then the CPS information packet, page 4. So this is just, this is after the med list that we looked at, the previous residential information packet. So it's very similar. You've got your date of hire, the CRIM check, the BAS, the DMV, the auto insurance, and then the TB test date. So, and that's a change. So this form was very recently changed, like this morning, to include the TB test instead of it still had annual evaluations on it. So we needed to remedy that. So I fixed that. And the new form, if anyone gets a copy of this, will have TB test on it. In fact, if you're going to be completing a CPS inspection, you might want to reach out to us to get a copy of the new form.
And what we're looking at too, for a lot of the CPS locations now, if they're not site specific as far as activities go, we're not going out obviously, so people are submitting other documents to us. So we always want to see, both for these homes, these CPS programs, and for the residential homes, on day one when we do our first review, we want to see everyone's CRIM check, BS, all that stuff. But going forward, we'll be requesting anyone new that's been added. So if you've added, a staff person, added someone else moved into the house, et cetera, we'll need the background checks on those folks too. The one thing we don't need for a document though are the TB tests. You shouldn't be sending us any results from TB testing. You got to give us a date, but we shouldn't be seeing the actual report. I only think of this because I got a skip packet earlier today, and they had actually submitted the TB test for folks in the house. So we do not need to have any of that, but we do need a date for that piece.
Okay. And then, so these are the trainings. So these are just the Relias trainings, or the trainings that would typically be done with Relias within 6 months of hire. We do not include the individual specific trainings on the CPS information packet because, quite honestly, it's just too much information to collect. If you've got, 30 individuals times 30 staff, I mean, we could spend all week just reviewing training documentation. So we only collect the Relias training dates on here. That's it for the CPS information packet. So certification review day. Please ensure that the requested documents have been submitted to the surveyor by the agreed upon day and time. If a walkthrough is being completed as part of the review, the surveyor will need to see the individual's bedroom, the basement, the attic, and other common areas of the home. The smoke detectors will be tested during the majority of walkthroughs. The surveyor will verify the count for any controlled medication. So what we'll do is we'll either have the home care provider or the manager, or whoever's there with us, who's med authorized, count the medications in front of us, and we'll have the log, and we'll review the count against what the previous count was documented in the log. The surveyor may request to review the medication orders for the individual as well as the PRN protocols. In fact, I think you can pretty much safely assume that all reviewers will now be looking at the current med log at all certification walkthroughs. The on-site portion of the review typically takes between 15 and 30 minutes, but can last longer. I would say now that we're looking at med logs, they're probably taking close to a half hour easy for each walkthrough.
Yeah.
And please note that the surveyor may request that the document review portion of the certification inspection be completed at the certified home or the CPS program. So if you've had a problematic review more than once, probably, the surveyor might just ask to do the review right at the home again, just like we used to do. We don't need to do these digitally. That's been a result of what happened with COVID, and we sort of like the way it's worked, so we've stuck with it, but it's certainly not required. We can absolutely do the review in the home and ask for all the documentation to be brought to the home. And that might happen if the reviews go badly at a specific program and the reviewer wants to be at the home for the entire review.
Yeah, we've had one recently where an agency kind of struggled with that, and the fact where the surveyor and the agency were emailing each other back and forth for several days regarding a bunch of different documents. So having one, two of you sit down at the table with all the documents together and go over it, it just saves a lot of time in the end in those situations.
This doesn't look right. That's not showing up correctly. Huh.
No, that's weird.
That's not even showing up in my. Oh, okay. I see what happened. Okay. So this is just the digital record submission policy that everybody has. We just put it up here so you could sort of see what it looks like. I'm not going to go through each criteria. Quite honestly, it'd be too hard for me to read on my screen anyway. But you've all got copies of this, or we can all get you a copy of it. And if you have any questions, now's the time to ask about anything on here. And I want to remind everybody, we sent out a incorrect version of this initially. So a lot of people are still using that. And if you look at your digital record submission policy and it says QAs twice at the bottom, if it asks for the quality reviews twice, but in two different ways at the bottom, that's the old form, and you'll want to request the new form from us, because a lot of people, I'd say most people, don't end up submitting the health history with the digital submission. And it should be sent, and we end up having to ask for it and have it sent afterwards. So. And then this is the CPS one. It's much smaller. We are not asking for a lot right now. This will be changing when Appendix K ends and we go back to looking at the full suite of CPS information. But there is a separate CPS training that we do that you're all welcome to attend when we start revisiting that. All right, any questions? Okay, doesn't seem like it. All right, why don't we move right on?
All right. So next is how do you respond to deficiencies or concerns when those are cited? Again, typically you have your review within a week or so. Hopefully at the most, you'll get your report back in via email, typically from the surveyor, and then you'll have 21 days from that day to get a plan of correction back to us. Again, all POCs are due within 21 days of receipt of results. The plan correction has to include the following. So we want to know how the program corrected or intends to correct the issue that was noted or issues that were noted, the date by which it will be corrected, how the program intends to prevent this issue from happening again in the future and being repeated. And we say to please submit the entire plan of correction when it's complete. Do not send it in piecemeal. So if you're working on things and you have part of it done, but you need a few more days to get the rest of it together, we'd much rather you hold on to it and just ask for, another 2 or 3 days, whatever, to get your plan of correction, and then send it all in one document. Only because the staff gets so many emails that sometimes it's hard to keep those, without getting mixed up with each other or something getting deleted somehow or not received. So if you can submit everything together, that is by far best case scenario. As far as future reviews go, After your initial certification review, you receive another review at the end of your first year. For example, if the home or CPS comes online on 4/18, the initial inspection will happen somewhere around mid-July in those cases. And then your first annual will then come up around your scheduled date of late March. So after the 4/18 date, you'll again have an initial visit somewhere in July-ish, somewhere in there. At that point, you'll get a certificate that would go from 4/18/23, and it'll expire on March 31st of 24. So whenever you start during a month, you're always going to end that year at the month prior. So whether you start on April 1st or April 30th, you're still going to expire on May 31st, and May 31st will be your expiration date going forward. Once you complete your first 2 reviews, again, that we talked about a little bit earlier, the initial review and your first annual, future reviews depend on the following things happening. So if you have a 1 to 3 person home and they have 3 or fewer deficiencies, you're then eligible for the abbreviated review that we talked about earlier, which again is just a document submission like you do for any review, but there'll typically be no site review in those situations. If you have a 1 to 3 person home and you have 0 deficiencies at their annual inspection, you're then eligible for a SCIP certification process. And again, as I mentioned earlier, just use that SCIP letter for your documents. It's only 3 or 4 documents versus, the 50, 60 pages you send us typically for the regular digital and annual inspections. As Jay noted earlier, CPS programs with 50 individuals or fewer, or actually fewer than 50 individuals that receive 2 deficiencies or less are eligible then for the biennial process. This requires the agency to complete the internal certification review after 1 year of all individuals in the program, and then maintain that documentation until the surveyor does your review the following year. So again, if you have 40 people and it's going to involve you reviewing 40 records, basically, and then putting it on paper for us, where if you don't follow the biennial process, then we would do a handful of individuals that we choose, and you send us documentation for those folks. And all other programs are reviewed annually, regardless of their performance. All right, so the renewal certification process, again, as Jay noted earlier, you need to submit your renewal application at least 60 days prior to expiration, 120 for licensure application if that's applicable. What you want to make sure with renewal apps, because this happens on occasion here, because we process so many applications every single week. Say that you expire. Let's see, it's May. Say you expire on July 31st. Is your expiration date coming up? So today you send us the renewal application saying you have 2 beds and 1 CPS, and we put that in the file to wait for the review. But then on June 3rd, you add a 3rd bed, or you add a CPS slot that wasn't there before. What that does, we need an application for you to add those, obviously, but we also need a revised renewal application. Otherwise, that ends up, you add those 3 beds, or add that 3rd bed on, June 3rd, but then when they process the file on July 31st, the application they have in there is 2 beds in 1 day. So if you can remember to, if you do add anything or make any changes after you submit your renewal application, but prior to the review, just make sure you send in a revised application to be that consistent application, so that they know they don't take that 3rd bed back out, because it looks to them like you've gone from 3, but you're requesting only 2 now. So we process so many of those. Office staff don't tend to have time to go back and do the research that we would all know. So just kind of keep an eye on those things. As Jay referenced before, you always have 2 reviews during your first year. And again, future reviews depend on the size of your home, size of the CPS slot, plus any review results. So licensed homes, again, we only have, I think, 50 or 60 of these currently. These are reviewed by HFA staff as similar to any other residential inspection, although there are a few additional requirements. A life safety code inspector will conduct an unannounced random inspection also. So again, we'll come out and do our piece residentially and CPS-wise, but you'll also have a life safety code inspector from this office who will come out unannounced and do the actual life safety code inspection for all those licensed homes. And typically it's around the same time that we go out, although they tend to be a little bit ahead of us at this point. So, if you have something for a licensed home coming up in August, September, they could be out there anytime now. So you may get a call when they're on their way, or they may just show up if they're in the neighborhood. Most of our licensed homes obviously are staffed, so there's typically always someone there that can help walk them through it, or someone that can get there in a reasonable period of time for their inspection. Failure to comply could potentially lead to oversight agency being fined or having their license revoked. So, that's not, it's, tougher in Seattle, where we don't tend to do a lot of revocations because of the size and the limited issues that we come up with. But licensure does have options in there, as far as significant fines, and or having your license revoked. So just keep that in mind for those of you who have the licensed properties. There's an additional tool here for licensed homes. Kind of gives you just a flavor of what the life safety code person is looking for when they go out. We still look at the same type of things. We still end up going into all the bedrooms, looking at the exits, make sure that they have screens on their windows, they have privacy blinds, etc. And same thing in the bathroom. Some basic stuff around the house, but most of the life safety stuff is going to be completed by the life safety inspectors going forward. All right, so waivers. We have 3 categories of waivers, and it's really depend on the rule you're requesting a waiver for. So the first one, we have the BDS waivers, and these are specific to the HEM rules. You can request anything, in 1001, 507, 1201. The waiver requests are submitted to BDS for review and approval. And the way it happens over there is you'll submit it to BDS through their email site. They will, whoever does the processing of those will then submit it to the program specialist that covers that region, the liaison from BDS. They will review it. Then it goes to Sandy Hunt at that point for her review. And then it comes over here last, just so we can make sure we're aware of it. And plus to make sure the actual rule that they're requesting is the actual rule that's on the requirement. If a provider or staff person has one conviction that happened at least 10 years ago, there's a separate waiver process for that. So that's really more of an informal process. So if you have a staff person or a home provider, they have a shoplifting thing from 30 years ago, it's still on their record because it never got annulled, but they had nothing else. In that case, you have, one person, one conviction more than 10 years ago. So if it's all those criteria, and what you can do in those situations is the waiver application that we noted above is filled out the way it is currently and the way that you've always been doing it. But it then goes to your agency currently to have them approve it. Then, of course, the guardian signs off on the waiver. And at that point, you're done. It doesn't go to BDS for the final approval. It doesn't expire. You just keep that on file at the program, and it just continues, at that point, as long as it's, the only time you would have to add to that would be if individuals change, things like that. But other than that, it just is there and it kind of goes forward, in perpetuity. HFA waivers, this is specific to all the HEP rules again. So this is only going to be specific to those homes that have a license. So most of you are not going to be touching on 814 waivers, but just so that they're out there. If you do end up down the road somewhere doing a licensed property, again applies to homes with license, have 4 more individuals living there. Again, both BDS and HFA have their own waiver request forms. As you can see here, they're really similar in a lot of ways. So they're asking for the same basic information, but they're different units. Jay and I work for health facilities. We do not work for BDS. So again, BDS has their own process they have with their waiver that they set over there. Anything HFA comes directly here, and we approve it and turn it around. So the HFA waivers tend to be a little quicker only because it's in-house to where we are, and it doesn't require as many approvals. Like for the HFA stuff, it doesn't require guardian approval. We require people from the household to sign off on stuff, but it doesn't have to go to the guardian for their approval. So that tends to speed it up as far as that and the number of folks here who have to review it when it comes in, where BDS still requires, obviously, the guardian signature on those. And it's one of those things that you can go either way. Both pieces have their own pluses and minuses, but they're definitely a little bit different in that respect as far as approvals go. All right, so the certification assessment survey. We used to hand these out at reviews when we used to spend, 2 or 3 hours in the home doing the actual digital review, but we just haven't done that for a bit now. So people, in some cases, sending these out via email when they email you the report. Some folks already have them saved on their office computers, so they just fill them out as they can. It's good feedback for us. We have to update this in the coming months because some of the area agency stuff is referenced on here, and there's going to be some changes there and how they interact with the provider agencies. So we'll be updating this, but if there are concerns, questions, pluses, negatives, whatever you want to submit to us, the things we can help you with. There's a lot of questions on there, kind of things that you may be struggling with that we can try to help you find an answer to. So definitely use those if they're, that would benefit you. And again, even if you don't have that form available, if there's stuff that, we may be able to help you with, if you're struggling with something that's happened at review, just even stuff that's just not certification related, but service provision related, can't always change those things ourselves, but we know who to go to ask those questions and try to help resolve it. So definitely use this as a resource. I've been around a long time now. Jay's been around for a huge amount of time. We know a lot of people and know how to get to the right person to kind of help with your issues when they pop up. So definitely, don't feel like you're alone out there. We really want people to reach out, and then we can connect you with the right folks to try to resolve whatever's happening for you. The next document is the closure letter. These really haven't changed over the years. It's pretty basic. So when a home closes, we just want you to send this document to us, and it just says, please be advised that you give us the address of it, the certain number, where it's located, type of thing, what day it was closed, and then there's just 4 questions below. The individual moved to, whatever that residence is, or their certain number, if you have that information. If you have, we need to know the reason for the closure. To the provider give notice that the individual moved for some other reason. Are any other individuals still living in the home? And then has a copy been sent to the fire department? So obviously, if there's other people living there, you would want to be in contact with the fire department because the home is still open at that point in theory. It's not open for us if we close the cert, but there may be other people living there under a different funding source. We've had a couple over the years where they've had, a 1001 individual and a PDMS person there. And then at some point, the 1001 person moves out and this certification closes, but there's another individual receiving services still in that home. So I would probably just update the fire department maybe at that point that there's only one person living there versus 2. Only because a lot of the departments, when they do their life safety, they take their copy back and they put stuff in their database so that when they get a call to that home, they're going to have a computer in the truck that pulls up that location and tells them how many people, are currently living there that may need assistance evacuating the home. So it's important that they obviously have the most current information for when they're responding in those situations. Just a few related things that come up. Unannounced inspections. We don't do a ton of those, but we definitely do them. If we, catch wind there's a problem somewhere with the home, especially if there's like a physical environment type of thing that's not being addressed, if we see it come in via complaint or something, we may well go out there and check it out to see kind of what's going on in those situations and try to help remedy it as best we can to make sure that everyone is safe. And sometimes there's just other complaints that come in that we get a call or an email just randomly about something we should go and look at. So we may pop in at those times. And, typically it's going to be one of those situations where we're going to try to go out there in the next half hour or so. We're going to call the agency that oversees the home and say, we just need someone to meet us out there. And, within half an hour or something, just so we can do a quick walkthrough. And then we'll talk to them while we're there about why we had to go there and kind of what the issue was. So again, they don't have them very frequently, but it's not an option that we do use on occasion. Scheduling or canceling inspections. As Jay mentioned early on, people are scheduling reviews, 2, maybe even 3 months out. Like they have their what month you guys on now? Jay, you on September, October, I think, somewhere out there. So
I think something like that, yeah.
It's a ways out when they get the assignment. So we try to schedule far enough out so that people have plenty of notice. And as far as canceling goes, if someone, at the home is sick, the individual's home ill, the provider's home ill, if you're not feeling well yourself and no one else can go to the walkthrough for you, let us know that kind of thing, because I have my staff do the same thing. If they don't feel well, they will get in touch with you, obviously, at that same time and let you know that, they need to reschedule. We don't want to, be out there when we're sick, and people don't want us in their homes, obviously, when they don't feel well either. So, we don't, the back problem, I guess, with canceling is that because of the workload that all my staff have at this point, it may get bumped out a few months. And that's kind of the way it falls, unfortunately, right now, because we're just out straight trying to keep up with what we have. So if you get into those situations, you may get a reach out from the area agency or the Guardian to say they need something for Rep PE to continue their benefits. If those situations pop up, just refer them over to me, and then I can enlighten them as to what we have in our system. Because all your homes, once you are certified, when the renewal time comes around, it shows up like as renewal or active home, but in renewal. So it doesn't show it as closed. It shows it's still being active, and they've been able to use that to continue billing, because we are verifying that this individual still lives at that location, still requires that level of support. Deficiency challenges, informal dispute resolutions, a lot of different names. If you get a deficiency and you don't feel it was cited, appropriately, or that you feel you met the rule either in the way they talked about it, or if there was another method that you thought, you met the rule in a different manner, we definitely encourage people to, contact the surveyor about those things. You can certainly send something to them and to me, along with your plan of correction for other issues that you may have, just to let us know, what the concerns are and why you feel that didn't apply. And if you're going to do that, we just need whatever documentation was seen at the site, just so I can review that with staff to see, kind of what went on and, what options may be available here, if any. And as far as the challenges and informal dispute resolutions, that is only applicable to deficiencies. It's not applicable to concerns. Typically, a concern is something that, doesn't quite violate the rule, but it walks that fine line, or something that we've seen that we just, not quite sure is accurate or appropriate. So we would typically set a concern for those type of issues. What we're looking for at that point is a response, because typically, again, it's not a rule issue. So there may be things that you just have to, you could say, yay, this is kind of what's going on, this is how we're doing it, or, we're going to change it, whatever it is, based on the situation. I'm trying to give an examples I've had recently around concerns, but do you have any examples, Jay, that come off the top of your head as far as concerns you may have cited? I don't see a lot of those.
No, I
popping out
try
there
to
right
stay
now.
away from for the most part, but sometimes
Uh-huh.
around physical environment issues, like if an individual's room is, somewhat messy, but it's not rising to a safety concern, but it's clear that they need more assistance, but they're not getting it. Sometimes I'll cite a concern for that, although I'll typically write a deficiency in that situation.
Yeah, we definitely
I-
had
Peter, I
last few
want to
years.
just chime in. This is Carrie Poliquin, everybody.
Hey, Carrie.
I know that I've been putting concerns down for SISs because I know that you guys have the scheduling issues and all that. I'm only doing it as a concern to make sure that it's on the record so that you guys and that we're also aware that these are 5, 6, 7 years late. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
I've been doing that as well, just to get it on the record.
that's a great example.
Yeah, we just want to see if there's a plan at that point. If it's been this many years, are you on a waiting list somewhere? Have you been forgotten as far as scheduling goes? We can help, try to, contact other people for you if that makes sense. Okay.
I think that is it. I think just questions.
All right. I know we threw a lot at you in the last hour and a half here. So any questions that come to mind right now that folks have? Anything that we went over, or anything related to certification in general that we may not have covered that you were wanting to hear more about?
And even if you don't have any today, always feel free to reach out to either Peter or I with any certification question at any point. That's why we're here. We're the experts on this, so you don't have to be. So feel free to use us if you need to.
And as I mentioned to Jay, my staff and Jake and Carrie can both, especially Carrie right now, can both relate that, we don't like writing deficiencies any more than you like getting them in most cases. So they're a necessity because that's, one way we can get at the issue sometimes. But if you can work with us and, kind of ask for a guidance, we can help you get to the place before you get to the review. So, there's no stupid questions. Everything that, is out there, we want you to ask about and be comfortable with before we come out and do our review.
And
Yeah.
Lisa has a question, I believe. If you want to unmute yourself, go right for it, Lisa.
Yes, thank you. So I was wondering, are we still sending in separate deficiency reports on our own letterhead for each area agency and vendor at this point still?
You want to take it, Peter? It's
That's
funny you
what
asked
I'm
this question,
seeing.
Lisa.
That's what I'm seeing typically. You know, I think this is going to change obviously in another 6 weeks, because once we get to July 1st, we're probably going to go back to what we were doing years ago, where we have to cite everything on one report, because July 1, you know, we're not going to necessarily know which agency the case manager is even tied to. So
Mhm.
typically we'll cite the vendor agency on things they have control over, but anything service agreement related, we tend to go to the area agency. But with more and more of these, private case management agencies out there, it's going to become extremely difficult for us to know who to actually reach out. So we're going to have to ask the vendor or the new provider agency in those cases to reach out to whoever that individual service coordination person is, and address it that way, because there's no way for us to track it with the number of reviews that we do and the number of options people are going to have as far as private service coordination.
I'm going to
But-
jump in again, everybody. This is Carrie Poliquin. Hey, Lisa. In terms of sending it in, at least directly to me, because I deal with you guys a lot, just make sure it's sent to me so that vendors aren't getting it from you and then I'm reaching out a month later to ask you where it is. It's quicker and easier that way, just to make sure that I do have it from you directly.
Absolutely. No, that makes
Great.
sense. So
Thank
for
you.
now, we'll just continue using our own letterhead until we hear otherwise and sending it directly to the surveyor.
Yes,
Yeah,
that would be great for me anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just do that for now, because again, come July 1, it'll look very different as far as how our reports go out and who they go to. So
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't
unexplored
think-
territory here for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be really, really important that all the people that are vendors here check the service agreements for accuracy, because we're going to be citing you on these service agreements essentially. So
Mhm.
that's how it always was in the past. We would cite the agency who held the cert, and then they would deal with the area agency who was responsible for those things. But there's just no way for us to do it this way anymore come July 1st. So back to the old way it is, but so now it's really going to be on each vendor to make sure that they're really on top of these service agreements, because otherwise you're going to be taking deficiencies for things that you don't do yourselves.
Yeah, and some of the biggest things I cite around service agreements these days are when a gap comes up, if there's not an amendment. So, for you folks that are going to those service agreements and you see if there's going to be a gap because of a, service agreement being held later than usual, then I would reach out to the service coordinator then and work with them to, prompt them to do that amendment. They may not always think that they need that right away, depending on where they're coming from and what their experiences are with our system. So if you can head off any of those, that'll do, everyone some favors in the end, obviously.
Yeah, and it seems like because of COVID, they got better at those amendments. Like I hardly ever see an ISA that hasn't been amended when there's a gap now. Like I honestly can't remember the last time I cited a gap, because they're so on top of it. Because it's almost like it's just like doing business, like you do the amendment because it's going to be late almost every year. It feels like with a lot of these service agreements.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, Jay, that's not true across the board. I'll just throw it right out there.
Carrie's got some rough regions. I'll tell her that. I'll definitely say that. Any other questions? All right. Well, if no one has anything, we'll just get going. But thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you all attending, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the information.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
folks. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.